Well, to shed more light on this, we have the pleasure to have with us over the phone our dear guest, His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meleegy, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening, Your Excellency.
Good evening to you.
Well, Your Excellency Ambassador Meleegy, how did you follow the demonstrations by the Israeli people demanding the return of the Israeli hostages captured by Hamas since the 7th of October, and also demanding an early elections, demonstrating against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, we have to understand that these demonstrations have been going on for weeks now, and even more than that, actually, for the failure of the government to get back the hostages retained by Hamas during the war. And actually, we have to understand that if Israelis are demonstrating, it's just because of the sake of the hostages, not because that they are against the war against the Palestinians. And
yes,
this is something
yes.
that is very important that we have all to understand.
Yes.
The idea is that the poor treatment of the current government to the hostages case, that's what brought those people to the streets. But we have also to mention that the latest statistics that were did in Israel by official authorities have shown that over 98% of the Israelis do not see that the IDF has used more firepower than it should, which means that they are totally agreeing with the killing of the 33,000 Palestinians who actually passed away the last 200 days, even more. So the idea is that the demonstrations are only meant to free the hostages and not for the sake of the Palestinians. And this is totally understandable coming from the Israeli point of view. But I think that we have to understand that the picture is much more larger than that, and that we have to force Israel to comply with the international law and to stop the war crimes, and especially the genocide that is taking place in Gaza, which is the most important thing for the other side of the story.
Yes. Yes, Your Excellency Ambassador Meleegy, in the only truce that took place months ago, that was a one-week truce, we saw an exchange of hostages between the Hamas group and the Israelis. So, and everything was going on very good. Yet, after this, Israel, we found that it did not comply to any truce and didn't want any truce yet. The people in Israel calls for the return of hostages, and from the Israeli side, the government says that they are keen on the health of the hostages, the Israeli hostages. How they are keen on the return of the hostages, yet we see a clear failure and not caring for the hostages in also the raids and the strikes that is made by Israel to the Palestinian side, as if that Israel wants to say the hostages were killed, and yet they are killed, of course, maybe in strikes by the Israeli side. So how did you see this, the way Israel is talking to its people?
Well, actually, there is two points of view to see this, or two diverging points of view to see this. The first one is the hostages' families and the general public in Israel, which thinks that the return of hostages has to be the first priority. But from the government point of view, the destruction of Hamas, and at least this is the declared reason for the war, is the total destruction of Hamas. But of course, the hidden one that nobody is talking about, which is to make the whole Gaza Strip unlivable and unbearable for Palestinians, taking the hostages as scapegoat for that reason. So the idea is that the government wants totally to make Gaza unlivable for the Palestinians so that it can maybe convince them voluntarily, between inverted commas, to leave the Gaza Strip and accordingly fulfill the Israeli wish to get rid of Gaza and the citizen of Gaza.
Yes.
And second, to regain control over the city after, in the period that is going to follow the current war. So there are two different points of view here. I think the Israeli government is considering that the hostages that are with Hamas right now could be considered as a collateral damage, and their loss could be a part of the war and the gains that they are going to get by the destruction of Hamas, which is why we have demonstrators in the streets, because they know that the government is ready to sacrifice the hostages in favor of the continuing of the war, and accordingly the stay in power of the current extreme right government that lost the faith and lost the confidence of the Israeli public.
Yes, I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your valuable information. Your Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meleegy, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for joining us over the phone and for your valuable information. Ladies and gentlemen, a short break and I'm going to be back with you.